Lois, my fellow or my sister Canadian. I'm so glad you're with us today for the Blue Ocean Business Summit. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You're in Grand Cayman.
Well, thanks for having me, Lori. I'm very excited to be here.
Just for the audience, just want to let them know that we go way back. And we both were working at Sunset House, and we're not going to tell how many years ago. And since then we've gone our separate ways. I have been working at NOAA and all sorts of other places around the world, and you have been doing all sorts of things. And one of the cool things that I know you did was you went back to Florida and you took Alex Brilsky's course. Can you tell us about that and how it inspired you?
Yes. Okay. Yes. I had been, working like back in the industry for a little while. I've worked in it for over 25 years now, and just had breaks now and then. And I wanted to get back into it on a full-time basis, and had done so by going and working on a liveaboard. And I loved the company that I was working for, but it just didn't suit me. And I also felt like there's got to be more to it now than this, because you're getting on, and I wanted to do something that was more meaningful than just teach people how to dive and take pictures. So I started talking to people, and when I was here in 1996, and here being Grand Cayman, there was a cruise ship that ran aground, and it was the Holland American Mazdam, and it did quite a bit of damage to a reef, and they did a call back then for dive masters and instructors to come out on their days off, and it was a fellow by the name Peter Milburn. Peter, yeah. So were you here when that happened? Okay, so he headed up the cleanup, and of course I was out there every chance I got, and I thought, oh, this is really neat. This is really fun, right? So I left Cayman in 2000, and I came back a couple of times to visit, and I was absolutely horrified at the changes in the reef. So this all came into consideration when I started trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and how I wanted to work in the industry. So somebody told me about Dr. Alex Brilsky, and then introduced me to him, and he was at that time organizing his first ever accredited coral restoration class at the Florida Keys Community College. So he said, sign up for it, right? And I'm like, I'm too old. And he's like, no, you're never too old. So anyways.
I love Alex.
Yeah. So I love Alex too. So anyways, I ended up signing up, and I was in Victoria at the time, and I think I told you this. I just loaded up my van, and I drove from Victoria, British Columbia down to Key West, and I stayed there for about 9 months altogether. And part of Alex's class was going to the Coral Restoration Foundation up in Tavernier, and well, it was like going out to the coral nursery. And Ken has a saying, and we keep saying that you have to change it, Ken, because he says, "Oh, you drank the Kool-Aid,"
yes,
right?
Yeah, so he's still using that saying, by the way.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, but it's true. And when you go out to this nursery and see all this incredibly healthy coral and all the life that it attracts, like the big schools of fish and the tiny little tiny little crabs, and you've got a hogfish sitting over your shoulder while you're working, and everywhere else in the Keys, hogfish flee in terror as soon as they see a diver, So it was really incredible to see this. And then when we got to go out and actually transplant coral out onto the reef and see how some of the already transplanted coral was doing, I thought, this is amazing. So I did one full semester down in Key West. And then I talked to Alex, and I said, do you think that Ken would let me do an internship with him? And I guess Alex, talked to Ken about it, and then I started stalking Ken and saying, Ken, let me come up there. And so I did, and I spent about 4 months up there altogether, and going out 5 days a week, 6 days a week, whatever it took, spending 5 or 6 hours a day underwater in the nurseries and then out planting. And it was the hardest work I've ever done, but I've never felt so good at the end of the day. I mean, it was just amazing. So when I finished that, my goal was to go someplace where I was told that they were interested in getting a coral nursery started. And it's still a very small community. It's getting bigger every day, which is good. But I was given a few names, and of course, because I'd spent so much time in Cayman previously, it was sort of at the top of my list. And so I sent out a couple of resumes, and Stephen Broadbelt, who owns Ocean Frontiers, has a program already where they go out and watch the coral spawning, right? So he and this other fellow wrote this thing, and they're accurate, like 99.9% accurate, the dates that the corals are spawning here in Cayman. So that's a really cool thing. And he's very environmentally conscious, and so he hired me sight unseen, and that was about 2 years ago now. And we've been trying since then to get permits for coral nurseries.
And then just coincidentally, while you're there,
yes,
a cruise ship hits the reef off of Georgetown. The coincidence is uncanny.
Well, yeah, it was pretty. I mean, it's sad, but I think what that did was, if you want to look at a silver lining, I think that might have been one of the things that pushed Cabinet forward in improving coral nurseries, because I was almost ready to leave. I thought, this is never going to happen. I was getting discouraged because I didn't want to just be, nothing against being a dive master or being a dive instructor, but I didn't want to just be a dive instructor. I wanted to do something more. And I do a few things here at Ocean Frontiers and try and educate people wherever I can. I do a diver's night, and I show things on the lionfish infestations, and I always recommend different movies like Mission Blue and all these, I've got a whole list of movies that I'll give to people if they're willing to watch them. But that wasn't enough. I wanted to do the physical work. And the government here has been so slow in getting on board. And one of the things that Ken keeps on bringing up is that people keep trying to reinvent the wheel. And Alex has said this. The science on this is done. I mean, it's great to see people doing studies on it to see if they can get things better. And I know, for example, Moat Marine Lab has been doing some studies on the massive corals, like the stony corals, and they're getting them to grow 25% faster, right? I might be wrong on the numbers, but I heard 25% faster. And then what they're doing is they're going out and drilling holes in an existing coral head that's dead recently, but is the same type of coral, and they're sort of coring it. So then the coral starts reskinning it. Right?
Oh.
Yeah, so that's all really interesting, but it's expensive, and it's all done in labs, and like the initial coral growing is done in labs. So with the coral methods that Ken uses, it's very inexpensive. Anybody can do it, or not anybody, but once you've had training, you can do it, and it's very, very successful. So the Cayman government, they've just been dragging their feet about getting the nurseries in place, and there's some that are really keen on it, but I don't know what the holdup exactly has been. I've heard things like, well, we want to do it right, but everywhere else in the Caribbean they're doing it, and it's being successful. So I've read figures that some of the nurseries have up to 90% success rate with the outplants, and then you've got the people who are always going to be negative no matter what, and they go, well, what if you get a bad bleaching, or what if you get this, or what if you get white band disease? Well, what if we do nothing? It's like all those things can happen, but that's one of the things about having a coral nursery is trying to create genetic diversity so that you've got these stronger sort of super corals so that they can survive these things. And right now they're so widespread that they think that when they spawn, it's not mixing, right? So, or not mixing like it used to. And I see proof of that down here. I think. I mean, I'm not a scientist, right? But I see stands of elkhorn and staghorn here that look probably like the whole island did 40 years ago. I mean, just absolutely amazing growth. And then you'll go for a couple of miles and there's nothing, but you can see remnants of it. So why does that one coral live and looks like it's thriving? And it's not always in the best conditions. And then you go and all the other coral is dead between like point A and point B. So, there's different zooxanthellae that lives inside the corals, and they figure that some of them were more resistant to high salinity, some of them are more resistant to like siltation, right? Temperatures, yeah, all other things, right? So, like from what I've been taught is that if you can create genetic diversity where it doesn't exist, then all the corals have a lot better opportunity. And even if you can just get that coral out onto the reef and it's taking a spot, it's taking up some of the real estate that algae might be taking up, then you're helping.
Tell me what happened that fateful day when Carnival Cruise Lines did, well, just what happened?
Okay, well, it was in port, and it was on August 27th of 2014. And the story that we've all been told is that the captain was wanting to anchor, but he was afraid of swinging around because of the wind, so they're still anchoring here. And there's a designated anchorage that that's been there for years. So the pilot that was under the direction of Port Authority was getting flustered, and I guess there was some sort of miscommunication between Port Authority, the pilot, and the cruise ship, and the cruise ship ended up dropping its anchor. And the cruise ship has a draft, I think, of about 27 feet, and it dropped its anchor, and you know how big those anchors are. It dropped it in about 50, 55 feet, and it was on a dive site, which is right in front of Don Foster's dive, which is ironic because it used to be Parrott's Landing, right? So I worked there for almost 10 years ago. So I used to dive that reef a lot. So it laid out a lot of chain as well, and each link, does a lot of damage. So as they were sitting there all day, and I guess it happened about 10 o'clock in the morning or so, and the guys from Don Foster's saw this right away, and they went out there with video cameras, and they called Department of Environment, and the Department of Environment was right out there. And it was just, imagine a snowplow going through underwater. That's what it looked like when the anchor pulled out, because where it impacted, and then, when they're pulling in the chain, that chain swinging was breaking everything, but the actual impact with that anchor that weighs, I don't know how many tons, and then it drags a little bit. So you know how a snowplow, it sort of pushes everything to the side, and then in the middle it's just mush. That's how it was on the reef. So, so when it happened, it was in the paper, but it didn't really get around the island that fast. I mean, it was a couple of days later that I heard about it. So the first thing I did was I called DOE or sent them an email, and I said, if you're putting together a volunteer, effort, I would very much like to help. And I didn't hear from them. And I didn't hear from them. And a few more days passed. And I emailed Keith Somm and at Sunset House, yeah. And I said, Keith, have you heard anything? So he said no. So I think it was about a week later, like Keith had emailed them at DOE, and then about a week later we got an email saying that DOE does not have funding, and they don't have the manpower or the know-how to go out and fix it. And if Keith and I wanted to organize a volunteer effort, we could do it, as long as everybody knew that we were under the guidance of DOE, right? So they're still in charge, but we're the ones who have organized all the volunteers, and he's done the topside stuff because he hasn't been diving for a while, right? So I think he's got like a back injury or something. So he hasn't even been out on the site, and so they put him in charge of the, I guess, like the logistics, right? And then I'm in charge of the underwater organization.
So how did you do it? When you first went down with your first group of volunteers, what did you do?
The first dive, we just looked around, and we had a meeting at Sunset House, and we asked all volunteers that were interested. It was a night, like a Thursday night. It was all volunteers who were interested. They could come out and find out what we were going to do. And Department of Environment spoke, Peter Milburn spoke, and then I spoke last, right? And so then on the Saturday, we all met at Don Foster's, and it was agreed that we would all go out, just have a look, and then go out again and start working.
Were the volunteers all local, or were there some tourists as well, dive tourists?
They were all local, and here's one of the things that's been frustrating, and this is one of the things that I was warned about from not only Ken, but Alex as well. Most of them aren't divers, like, in the dive industry. They're all, like, lawyers, doctors, bankers, people that work. And when I signed on for Alex's classes, he was saying, "Oh, you can be like a guinea pig, so we'll see how this works to get the dive industry involved." And there's some people that are interested, but there's a lot of people that are just not. And you think, okay, this is your livelihood. You need to show a little bit more interest in going out there. And we've had some support from local dive shops as far as the cleanup goes. Red Sail's been absolutely fantastic. They've been giving us boats, but they also have businesses, and so if they have guests, then our boat gets bumped. So yeah, and it's a doable shore dive, but it's not safe to do it more than once because especially if you're working underwater and hauling gear out, it gets difficult. But the first day that we did it, we had, I hadn't seen the site, right? So I didn't know exactly what to expect. When I worked on the Maz Dam, that was all done from shore, but the deepest was about 35 feet. And we were able to work from shore. So, we didn't have anything organized yet. We didn't have crates. We didn't know what we were going to do. So we went out, we came up with a plan, and Foster's Food Fair here on the island donated a bunch of milk crates. So we got about 200 milk crates from them, and then another organization donated us these big bags. So we've been putting the rubble in that and moving it into a rubble pile. I think we've taken about 5 tons of rubble so far, and we made a nursery out of the milk crates, like tied them all together like a raft. And one of the things that I snuck in there was I snuck in a couple of coral trees. So we put the first one up just before Christmas, and we decorated it.
Don't tell anybody.
Yeah, no, it was because DOE at the initial meeting, they said if we concentrated on fragments that were bigger than, I think they said 5 centimeters, and ignored the rest, right? And so, like I said, I got to speak last, and I said, okay, we're not going to ignore any of it. Like, even the small pieces, we'll glue them onto discs and hang them up on a tree. And they sort of looked at me, and I'm like, we're going to do it. So we just did it, and they haven't said anything. And we've been sort of taking this attitude, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. And, I hope that doesn't get me in trouble. But, I'm not doing anything, or we're not doing anything that hasn't been proven to work in other places. And
don't worry, Lois. I'm hearing this a lot on this summit.
Yeah. You
have to do it. You have to step up, and you have to change the way things are done. We cannot operate business as usual, and that's what you're doing. You are changing the way things are done.
Yeah, and there's people who they go, well, why bother? Why it's all going to be gone in 50 years. I think I've already said that, but why not bother? I mean, if we don't do anything, then yeah, it will all be gone in 50 years. But I even carry, like, I've got two-part epoxy. I even carry it in my BC because in a normal situation, if the oceans weren't so acidic and if there wasn't all this crap going on. The coral, it breaks, and that's one of the ways that reproduces, like the elkhorn and staghorn, right? So, if like this winter has been really stormy, so there's broken stuff all over the sand, and if it's left in the sand, it just gets buried, And I'm not saying this. This is what I've seen. Like, it just gets buried. So if I see a healthy piece, I pick it up, clean it up, scrape off a good spot for it on the reef, pull out my putty, and glue it on.
What kind of training are you giving the volunteers so that they know what to do?
We show the volunteers, like, we've got flashcards. I think I've got some of them. I've got like cards that show them, and like, this is what live coral looks like. This is what dead coral looks like. We've got group leaders. So any of the group leaders are people that have come up with me and a few times, and they sort of get signed off. Okay, like, I know I can trust this person. So the first thing that we had to do was stabilize the area, and we're still in that process, right? So if you don't stabilize it, then every time the coral spawns or something settles on the rubble, and then if there's any movement in the water, it just rolls it all off, right? It's like a big rock tumbler, right? So nothing will ever really grow properly in that area unless it's stabilized first.
So in stabilizing, what do you actually do when you stabilize?
Well, we've been removing all the rubble, all the small rubble. All the big rubble we've been putting to one side, especially if it still has sort of like an outer skin on it. And once we've got down to like the substrate, if you will, like as far down as we can get, with there being no more sediment or it's just really fine pieces of coral, then we've been putting the bigger pieces back on top of it. And then what we'll do is we'll get cement and we'll fill it in with cement, and then the smaller pieces of coral that are sort of too big to use epoxy on, we'll put in the cement. And one of the things that's been really cool is I've been on Noah's site a lot, and I'll go, okay, like this guy, I'll send him an email, and they get back to me within a couple of days. It's been awesome. There's a fellow, Dr. Sean Griffith, I think his name is, and he's been working on a project in Puerto Rico for the last few years. And he sent me his telephone number and said, hey, you've got questions, just call me. So people want to help everybody on this, and there's no secrets. I mean, and that's one of the things that a couple of years ago when I saw you at that meeting at DEMA, that's what everybody was trying to stress is if we have information, share it.
Yes. This is a different way of doing business than we've done before, where everybody is like holding on to their special piece of information. They're not letting it out there, and in order to deal with these big problems, we need to share information. We can no longer afford to hoard it, and that's what I love about Ken at Coral Restoration Foundation, and Alex, and so many others who are so generous with their help and their advice and their list. Alex was on our summit last year, and I asked him if he could give me some resources to share with the summit goers, and he gave me 20 pages of resources. It was crazy. It was like he handed me his Rolodex.
Yeah.
And this is what we need. This is the kind of collaboration that we need, and we need to feel okay about doing it. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about in terms of collaboration, obviously this is going to cost some money. There are some out-of-pocket expenses. So how do you cover some of the costs? Okay, at first we were just paying for it out of our pockets, right? And that wasn't so bad because the materials that we were getting, like a hammer here, some zip ties here, it didn't amount to much, and a few places on the island, like I said, Foster's Food Fair, just
donated all the milk crates. Flowers donated all these sacks. There was one place, I forget the name, it was donating fuel, so we had a lot of donations at first. Here's the funny thing, though. We did a fundraiser, and the fundraiser was in February. Our goal was to raise about $10,000 and just, to buy things like epoxy, because epoxy that we need is like for 100 pounds, it's like $1,000, right? So it's expensive. And I was talking to one of our guests in the dive boat here, and telling him about it, and he goes, hell, I'll buy you some epoxy. And he went down to DOE and gave him a check. So, when people believe in it, they're really generous, right? So that was great. So, and then Cayman Airways donated the freight. They didn't charge us the freight to bring the epoxy in. So there's been a lot of people that have been really generous. So we had this fundraiser, and it was more to raise awareness, or it was just as much to raise awareness, because it's a labor-intense project, and volunteers are absolutely necessary. So just a few days after our fundraiser, we were told that Carnival was giving us some money. So far they've given us $100,000, right?
Is this to pay for damages, or is this just a thing they're doing?
No, it's a thing they're doing, because nobody has been found guilty, right? They've dismissed any charges. Like, there was no charges laid against Carnival, because it's sort of a unique situation. If Carnival was found guilty, then that's fine. It's their fault. But they were being told where to drop the anchor by a pilot that was under the guidance of the Cayman Islands Port Authority. And the Cayman Islands Port Authority is a member or a division of the government, right? So it would be the government suing the government, right? And then people argue, well, ultimately it's the captain's fault, right? Because he's obviously been here before, and he knows, he should know the water. He's got a depth finder. He's got all these other instruments on his boat, knowing that he's out of the zone. But the pilot told him where to drop, right? So it's all very interesting. Now, the Carnival came through, and the ministers, there's been a few ministers that have been talking to Carnival, trying to get more money. So they're hoping to get quite a bit more money. That money was put into an account for us at Cayman's National Trust. So there's only a couple of people that are allowed to access it. So Keith, Sam, and I are like signers on it. So far we've reimbursed the people who had bought stuff out of pocket, and now we're waiting to make a big purchase. And we're going to buy a boat, and we are trying to get a barge in place so that we have a work platform to work off of. And the boat's not going to be huge. It's going to be enough to take about 6 divers out. But like I said earlier, it's just too far of a surface swim. And by the time you get out there, you might have 30, 35 minutes underwater, and then you have to swim back. And it's just, from a safety point, it's just not good.
This begs the question. Why or how do we stop these things from happening again? And knowing what we know about cruise ships and how little they add to island economies, it actually trickles down to the people there. Why does Cayman even have so many cruise ships, and how are they going to stop this from happening again? I've heard that they're talking about putting in a cruise ship dock, which I think is just like, it's the worst idea ever, and I think there's many people around the world who would concur. But is it better than somebody dropping an anchor possibly on a coral reef? I don't know. Tell me.
There's different thoughts on that. I've spent quite a bit of time in Cabo San Lucas as well, and it's the same there. There's a few people that benefit from the cruise ships coming there, right? A few of the locals, a few of the businesses. But I think the studies that have been done, it shows that, you know, a cruise shipper might spend on average $60 per stop. Yeah, and the one that, and also, this is funny, the Carnival Magic got rated as one of the worst ones for dumping black water, right?
Mm,
So
yeah, they're the worst. Carnival is the worst on the Friends of the Earth cruise ship report.
yeah, so, but it all comes down to money, you know, and um, as long as there's a few people here that are benefiting, that are higher powers or you know, connected, then they're going to keep coming. And the cruise ships, they'll blackball you. They'll say, okay, if you aren't going to do this, then we'll stop coming there. And then the people who are going to be affected get on the bandwagon. They're like, no, you have to do this. And I've seen this not only here, but I was friends with this fellow in Cabo San Lucas who was sort of like the Adrian Briggs of Cabo, and he had all the tenders there. But one of the things that a lot of the cruise ships do there, I think it's called global static GPS or something, where they can just stay in one place using their bow thrusters and using their engines and their GPS, right? So they can stay there all day. I've seen them, you know, do that. So, you know, but then people say, well, they're burning fuel, right? Well, you know, what's worse, them burning fuel or, you know, dumping anchors onto the reef? I don't know what the solution is, but I know that every place it's come up that we need a cruise ship dock, they've eventually got cruise ship docks. You know, because the cruise ships, they just bully it. They say, well, we won't come there anymore. And then there's a few businesses that suffer, and then they make enough noise that they, you know, they bend and they give it into them. They let them do what they want. So
it's sad. I think I was talking to Stefan Gosling about carbon footprint and in general, just in the tourism industry, and the combination of a flight and a cruise ship vacation is possibly the most unsustainable type of vacation you could choose.
yeah,
And the reason why they're so cheap is because they're not actually paying for the true cost of running a cruise ship, which is the dumping and the carbon that goes up into the atmosphere and the destruction of reefs. And not only that, but upsetting cultural heritage. And I know when I lived in Cayman, when the cruise ships came in, basically the downtown stopped.
yeah, and it's worse. I mean, when you came in, I think when you were here, we only used to have like one or two a week, right? Now you get 6 a day, and supposedly there's a rule that you're only allowed to have 5. But then it's like if one is dropping anchor and then pulling up anchor before the other one gets here, or you know, they sort of overlap, then it's okay. But you'll go down and you'll see 6 cruise ships anchored there. And it used to be that Stingray City was the famous like dive to go to, and you got to see the stingrays there. If you saw Sandbar now, it's just turned into a cruise ship zoo.
Oh no.
Oh yeah, there's some days you'll go out there. It's so bad. On cruise ship days, I've actually told my boss I don't want to do it anymore because I do the Sandbar trips here. And it's quite a pleasant experience to take people out there when it's not busy. But when you have these boats out there, and there's 40 stingrays or so swimming around between 1,000 people, and the guides grab onto them and they restrain them, and they won't let them go, and they'll hold them for the whole 40 minutes they're out there so that people can kiss the stingray and get good luck and do all this other stuff. And it's just sickening, like it's a zoo. And then you have some people that they look at you like, where's our stingray? Why aren't you holding one like this? And if you explain to them that the stingrays are actually being abused and that by law you're not supposed to be doing that, they're pretty understanding. Some of them, but some people just don't get it. You know, some people just have that mentality where they don't want to think about the subsequent, you know, the consequences of holding a stingray or dumping garbage at sea, or, you know, how do you change people's way of thinking?
There must be some people, well, the dive industry. The dive industry would have the closest link, I would think, to the ocean. And does the dive industry there not have some kind of clout to come together and explain the errors of our ways for allowing this kind of economic boon to happen? Because it's a huge bust.
It gets brought up. Like, I know there's a water sports meeting tonight, and I don't know what they'll talk about there, but it's, you know, the ones I've been to, they've talked about various things, and sandbar, for example, has come up. And, you know, that's not really the divers, the dive companies that are doing that sort of abuse to the stingrays. It's more the locals, I hate to say it, but, you know, they think that they're entitled. And with the fishing here, like, we used to have a big spawning aggregate for Nassau grouper just outside of Ocean Frontiers, and it's gone. But you still see the people out there fishing Nassau grouper. You know, they're not supposed to take turtles. A fellow I know who's on the police force here arrested some Caymanians last week. They'd speared 2 big green sea turtles. You know, so they very much, and, you know, I hope none of them see this, but they just have a sense of entitlement, a lot of them, and they think that because they were born here, they can keep doing it. And you try and explain to them that, listen, I understand that your grandfather or your great-great-grandfather was a fisherman, but they fished for you and your family. They didn't fish for you, your family, 100 restaurants on 7 Mile Beach, and 150 people that are coming there every night. You know, it's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
And with the coral and everything, right? A lot of the dive shops, and I think this has been a problem whenever people have been trying to introduce some sort of coral restoration. They feel that if they accept coral restoration, they're admitting that their reefs are in bad shape, but they are, you know. So people aren't stupid, especially if they've been diving for some time.
Yeah, it's strange to me because Cayman has such a high standard of living. It's a tax shelter, and most of the locals work in banks, and all of the infrastructure, which is very high paying, all of the infrastructure that goes into tax shelters, and to try to explain to people that they shouldn't be killing grouper. It's just anathema to me. So there's some kind of a communication problem. What are the schools or the government or the dive industry? I know when I was there, we would go around and we'd do these presentations to locals and explain to them how important their local marine resources were, and this is why we don't do this kind of thing. Is something like that happening now?
There are people that do that. Like, I've gone to some of the schools here and told them about the corals, right? But there's still, like, enough people that influence it, just like there are with the cruise ships coming here. Like, you know, as long as those people are still here, that's still going to happen. And, you know, I'm not saying that you have to get rid of all those people, but you try and educate them without getting too in their face, because after all, this is their island, right? And you do what's best. I mean, I got told that I was making stuff up, and how could I come here as an outsider and make all this stuff up? And I said, well, you know, so-and-so and so-and-so who work at Department of Environment. And they said, yes. And I said, well, they're Caymanian. And they're telling you that there's no grouper left. Are they making it up? And this person didn't know what to say. They just sort of looked at me like, well, that makes sense, but I don't want it to make sense. You know? So... And I think for a lot of them, like even with the coral stuff, it's out of sight, out of mind. A lot of the locals don't swim. They're afraid of sharks. You know, the sharks are going to get them. So as long as they're afraid to go in the water and they don't see what's underneath the water, then why should they care about it? You know, if they're not making any money directly from it, you know.
Right, and they're afraid of it.
And they're afraid of it, then why should they protect it? And it's... like part of my presentation that I do for the school kids, you know, first of all, I ask them, like, you know, do you know what coral is? And a lot of them do. So the teachers are getting better. Like, and like even 20 years ago, the schools here were very limited. Now we've got a lot more schools than there were, and they've got a lot more foreign teachers, and the teachers are sort of embracing it. I've actually got quite a few teachers that come out and help on the restoration, so they'll teach their kids. But what if they knew that the coral reefs are one of the main protections against hurricanes, then maybe they might be a little bit more proactive about protecting them. They saw what happened here in Ivan and all the areas where they'd taken out the mangroves, and now they're just struggling to get mangroves back. So,
seems like we have to go through crises for people to even lift their heads up to take notice, and it's a sad situation because we are in a certain level of crises right now. We're in it. We need to protect the ocean because it's our life support system, and it's interesting that people who are actually at these islands where coral reefs are so valuable. Did you see that NBC article about the value of coral reefs in the Caribbean?
Yes, and yes, yeah. Well, we can't live without them. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Yeah, and it may have to come from the outside. It may have to come from media from the outside to start to highlight what's going on at a destination, and not to shame them, but to just let them know that these are really valuable resources and that are being taken for granted. And they can no longer be taken for granted because we're all connected. And what happens in Cayman affects
everywhere.
Except everywhere. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think that's one of the blessings about what happened with the Carnival Magic is I think it did sort of put the fire underneath the ministers, to get this bill signed through to allow us to have coral nurseries. And then about 2 months ago, a mega yacht was in, and it dropped an anchor, and it looks like it went on a joyride, and it damaged about 4,000 square feet of coral, just knocked the tops right off. So, they know that they need something. They know that they need something in place. And I don't know when the cruise ship docks are going to go through, but they will. There's too many people that have too much money invested. So once again, the money is the factor there. So
this just reminds me of the saying, killing the goose, the golden goose that laid the golden egg.
Yeah.
This is what's happening, and it's too bad because I love Cayman so much. I just love that place, and it just saddens me that people there can be so short-sighted. And I hope that cruise ship dock doesn't go through, but as you say, the system is in place, the justifications are there. When you said that $60, I read that $60 per passenger. Mm-hmm. I read that study. That study was done in Vanuatu between the government, I think the government and a cruise ship line that were trying to prove to everybody how valuable cruise ships were, and it was $60. Now, I've seen $60 per person coming in. Now, I don't know how they would spend $60 because they don't even eat there. They eat on the cruise ship. So I don't know where they're coming up with this amount. But I have seen other studies where it's as little as $7 a person. When you have 4,000 people coming into to port and they're not even eating there, and I don't know where these people are spending $60 at each port. A
lot of them, it's on the activities, right? And like here, they'll go to the dolphin coves, right, which we try and encourage people not to go to. And I do the Facebook for us, so I'm always posting things like about the cove and blackfish and everything as much as I can on our Facebook page. But so they'll go to that. They'll go to the turtle farm. They'll go to Sandbar. They'll go to all these. I think they're fooling themselves into thinking that they're environmental eco encounters, right? But that's where their money goes, is to tours. It goes some to diving, some to snorkel tours. But what the cruise ships do is they'll mark that up. So if a provider is selling it to the cruise ship for like $50, then the cruise ship will sell it for like $90 or something. Like, they make a lot of money off of the tours. And if you don't provide them with everything that they want, then they'll drop you like a hot potato. So.
And it's kind of like Walmart. You have to come in at a certain price or you're out of there. So they're probably charging $25 for some kind of a thing, an activity. and
Yeah,
it's being marked up to 60 or whatever it is. The accounting can be quite creative on these studies.
yeah. But that goes back to what I was saying is that, or and what you were saying is that there's very few people that actually benefit from it. So there's a few operators here that really, really benefit from the cruise ships coming in, and you see that, at Sandbar on a busy day. I mean, there's some days you'll go out there and there'll be 1,000 people out there, and each one of those people has probably spent about $60 to be there. So do the math, and they're the ones who abuse it the most, but would cry the hardest if it was taken away from them. And the Department of Environment used to monitor it out there. They had like a sandbar cop, if you will, and he'd go around and tell people, like, don't pick up that stingray, don't do that, don't do that. And then their funding got cut, and they couldn't afford that person anymore, and it was sort of like, it was self-policing for a while, but then it sort of got out of hand, because it's not just the fees that people are paying to go on the boats, but then all the guys who are operating the boats are trying to get photos, right? So it's like, kiss the stingray, do this, do that. So they're trying to get the stingrays to get the photos, and then they're tip whoring, right? So they just do whatever they can to get tips, and they don't care if it's ethical or not. They just want their tips, right? So some of those guys, they can make a few $100s a day if they have a good day on the boats, and they're not making much in a wage, so the tips are really important. It has. They have, but it gets covered up. It's just, it doesn't happen often. It doesn't happen very often, but people have been barred. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
But there's too much money. I mean, they're not going to shut it down. There's too much money in it.
How can we support you? What can we do? Because we're finding that as a collective, we're around the world, and we're having issues at different destinations. And how can we help you there with all of the issues you're facing? Is there a petition we can sign? Is there a letter we can write? What can we do to support you so that the Cayman Islands will know that people are watching them?
Well, I think that's important anywhere, is that people have to know that they're watching, being watched. And, you might remember, like, during Ivan or after Ivan, like the government was like, oh, no, we're okay. And they've always sort of adapted this ostrich, thing where they just bury their head in the sand. And so I know people from outside that have already asked about the projects, and the coral restoration and everything, and it does make a difference. But we wanted to get, like, Coral Restoration Foundation to come down here, and the Department of Environment doesn't want that. They want us to do it on our own. So, as far as support goes, we just need, I don't know, we need the government to support us, and that's the biggest thing. I was told, I don't even know if I should say this, I was told that one of the ministers, when they were discussing the whole restoration thing, said, you better make sure that those people, when they're moving that coral, they get all the roots.
Oh, dear. Clearly some ocean literacy training is required.
Yeah. So.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Oh, dear. Well, we need to come up with a plan to help you. There's something fishy in Denmark when they're telling you that's a group like Coral Restoration Foundation can't come down, but you have to use the Department of the Environment. But the Department of the Environment doesn't have any money, so you're gonna have to do it all on your own. But
before the Department of Environment has been great, right? And they're overtaxed, as far as, like, they're really thin as far as how much money they have, how many people they have. They've just been given the go-ahead to hire 2 new people that they've hired, but they need it for enforcement. I mean, they need those people out there to stop the yahoos from going out and spearing green turtles and collecting conch out of season. There's one spot just out front here. The rule is 10 conch per boat, and there was about 200 conch shells laying on the bottom. So people are going out and poaching them. So that's what the Department of Environment, they need the money to fix their boats and everything, right? So the Department of Environment, they understand, like the people there get it, and they want to do something. But it's the rest of the cabinet and government that has been very slow. And Ken Niedermeyer said to expect that. Alex said to expect it. He said that that's just something that goes with the territory. They're always sort of really hesitant to give you the permits, but hopefully it'll be like what happened in Bonaire. Once we get the permits and once we get them go ahead to do everything, then they'll be going, can't you do more? Because yeah. So people, there's always been this belief that we're going to go out and take healthy coral and kill it, or what if we take this healthy coral and kill it, and if people understood more how a coral nursery works, and you're only initially collecting the coral once, and then it grows, and then you cut it up, and you make more fragments from that, and then those fragments grow out, and then that's what you're putting on the reef, then it might be easier for the governments to get on board. But, Lori, I really don't know without the governments being on board, because in Cayman, there's a law that you're not allowed to touch coral, right? So we had that waived in order to work on this project. And we've had some people go, well, why bother? It's only, 11,500 square feet. Why bother? It's all going to die anyways. They're going to put the cruise ship dock in. It's all going to die anyways. And there's one coral head that was in the paper quite a bit. It's the greater star coral, or the Montastria cavernosa, this massive, massive coral head. And each of the individual corallites was probably like 2 feet long. So just imagine how long that coral's been alive. If it grows like, centimeters a year, just imagine how long it took for it to grow, Yeah. And it's this massive, massive mound, and it breaks my heart every time I see it, because we still have to right it. We still have to secure it, because it's on a sort of slope where it's still rubbly. Right, but it's been really slow work getting out there because we don't have a boat and we have to rely on volunteers. So if once we get a boat, we'll be in a lot better position, and hopefully that'll be in the next week or so.
How long do you think your stage one will you're securing the area, stabilizing the area? How long do you think that's going to take with 11,500 square feet?
It's going to take. Well, the Maz Dam was 7,500 square feet, and it took 9,000 man-hours, which was done in 3 months. But there they had 15, 20 people going out every day, right? And so right now we're just about to hit the 1,000-hour mark, and it's been 8 months, So we're hoping... now that we're out of the busy season, there's a few guys that work in the dive industry that we're hoping are going to be given permission to come out and work, 3 to 4 days a week. And we're hoping that we're going to be able to compensate those people so that we can just get the job done. And, once, it's sad, but at the end of the day, it does come down to money. So, and the volunteers so far have been really, really good. But I think a lot of them, when they signed up for it or when they started, they thought, oh, volunteer, this will be done in a couple months and then it'll be something else. But it's just dragging out and dragging out and dragging out.
What about dive tourism? What about the travelers coming through the resorts? Are they not being able to help out?
They are. And we've got our Facebook page. And so on our Facebook page, we've had people contact us from like the States and from England. Diver Magazine in England did an article on us, and there's been quite a few other publications that have written articles. So we have our Facebook page, and we post events on it, and we usually try and do a Restore from Shore every Sunday. And so just a couple of weeks ago, we had a couple come down from Illinois, and they based their entire week around coming out and doing restoration. So it was really cool. And I keep on telling my boss, I keep on saying, look at what Amy Slade's doing in Key Largo. I mean, she's filling boats, right, to go out to the nurseries. And I get these articles sent to me by various people, and I know, like, I know from when I was in the Keys, like, people are interested in it. I'm sure that most of the people who come down here and dive with us, like, we've got a lot of regular people that have been coming here year after year because we've got condos that they own. So, you know, I talked to those people on the boats, and they would love to do something new. They'd love to do something interesting like that. And most of them really want to do something that will give back, you know. So,
dive industry of the Cayman Islands, you're missing out on a huge opportunity here.
yeah, and I keep telling them that. Now, that was one of the initial things that the Department of Environment said to prevent people from jumping in on wanting to help, that we weren't allowed to profit from the restoration, right? But once we get coral nurseries, that's a different thing. We're not allowed to sell the coral or, you know, give it to aquariums or export it or anything. But there's nothing stopping us from taking people out and, you know, teaching them a PADI specialty or, you know, getting them involved that way. And you know, it's a business. Like, we have to make money somehow, right? As much as I'd like to be out there every day, I mean, I still have my rent to pay, and I can't be here if I'm not working. So, you know, it would be great if it made the operators get on board more. If there was potential for them to make money, then that's good, you know. But I think there's a lot of people that do it because they really want to, because it's the right thing to do, and there's a lot of people that won't do it unless there's something in it for them.
Well, I'm going to tell you, Amy Slate's going to be on, and I want you to share her video, her interview with your operators in the Cayman Islands, because she's going to just lay it out. This is how it's done. And I hope people listen up, and this can be replicated around the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'll be great. This is so cool about this summit, is that there's all these people who have little pieces of the big picture that they're bringing to the table, and I think what Amy Slate will help you do there, and Ken is involved, and all of these other little pieces of the puzzle are all part of the solution. And I want to thank you for being part of the solution, Lois. I can't believe you're there. They're doing such an incredible job, and putting up with a lot of frustration and a lot of denial and a lot of feet dragging, and just ignoring that this problem actually exists. So giving you strength and big hugs, and whatever we can do to help you, and hopefully people will contact you if they can help you, because your information is up on the website to help you with what you're facing. 11,500 square feet of damaged reef.
And that was just the Carnival Magic one. Now there's the other one as well, right?
So you add the 4,000 onto that.
Yeah.
So you're looking over 15,000 square feet of damaged reef.
That we know of, right? But it's not all doom and gloom. Like, it is getting done, and people, like, you know, every time we go out, we have new volunteers. Red Sail's been donating the boats, and every week that we do go out on their boats, we do have new volunteers. So it is amazing. Like, people go, oh, we just heard about this, or, you know, we came down here and we want to do this, and you know, it is really cool. I'm impatient, you know.
I know, but you're also on the bleeding edge of a revolution, so things are going to go slow. So just know that it's going slow. It's because you're heading into uncharted waters, and it is going to be slow. But once you have done it, then all the people behind you who are going to be dealing with this situation, and they will, they'll have you to follow, and you as a guide, and we'll all be thankful to you for having paved the way to clearing up the mess that cruise ships leave underwater. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Lois.
Thank you, Lori. We just need to get more people to drink the Kool-Aid, right?
Right on. I love Ken's Kool-Aid.
Yeah,
it's doing such great things for coral reefs.
Yeah.
Yeah. You take care, Lois. Thanks so much.
Okay, Lori.